In 2007, Nokia was unstoppable. They owned more than 40% of the global phone market. Their brand was trusted by over 1 billion people, a level of dominance that Apple, Samsung, or even Google could only dream of. But just a few years later, they were gone. What destroyed this $300 billion empire wasn't a lack of technology. It wasn't Apple's genius alone. It was something far more human: arrogance. This is the story of how success blinded one of the greatest companies in history, and what it teaches us about fear, ego, and the psychology of change. To understand Nokia's fall, you first have to understand how high they climbed. The story begins in Finland in 1865, not as a tech company, but as a paper mill. For over a century, Nokia reinvented itself, from paper to rubber to electronics. By the 1990s, Nokia had become the heart of the mobile revolution. Their phones were everywhere: reliable, indestructible, iconic. In 2000, the Nokia 3310 wasn't just a device. It was a symbol of trust. They had mastered what no one else could: engineering excellence plus mass adoption. Nokia wasn't just leading. They were defining the market. But here's where the first paradox appears. Success creates comfort, and comfort kills innovation. Inside Nokia, the culture began to shift. Employees describe an environment where engineers knew the truth. Smartphones were coming. They saw the threat from Apple and Google years in advance, but management didn't want to hear it. In internal meetings, top executives dismissed the iPhone as a toy. When engineers proposed a touchscreen model, the response was, "Our customers love buttons. Why change what works?" That single sentence captures the arrogance that destroys empire. In 2007, Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone. Nokia executives laughed. Literally. They thought Apple was crazy for launching a phone without buttons. But within a year, Apple had created not just a phone, but a new ecosystem: apps, internet, touchscreen. Meanwhile, Nokia kept updating the same old designs. They launched the Symbian operating system, but it was slow, outdated, and fragmented. Internally, employees begged to switch to Android, but upper management refused, afraid of admitting they were wrong. This is where psychology overtook logic. Fear of change disguised itself as confidence, and in that arrogance, the fall began. Arrogance is not just pride. It's a psychological defense mechanism, a way for the human mind to protect itself from doubt. When people or companies rise too high, they start to believe their past success is proof of future success. Psychologists call it the illusion of invulnerability. At Nokia, leadership believed they were too big to fail. They ignored feedback. They silenced internal critics. And that's how innovation dies, not with bad ideas, but with fear disguised as confidence. The paradox is simple. The more successful you are, the harder it becomes to question yourself. It's the same paradox that destroyed Kodak and almost destroyed Microsoft before Satya Nadella rebuilt it with humility. By 2010, the writing was on the wall. Nokia's market share was collapsing from 40% to less than 10%. In 2011, they made a desperate deal with Microsoft, switching to Windows Phone. But it was too late. Consumers had moved on. Developers had moved on. The world had moved on. By 2013, Nokia's mobile division was sold to Microsoft for just $7 billion, a fraction of its former value. Employees cried. Executives were silent. During his farewell speech, Nokia's CEO said one haunting line: "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." That single sentence reveals everything wrong with success culture. They didn't do anything wrong. They simply didn't evolve. The story of Nokia isn't just about phones. It's about human nature. When we succeed, we tend to protect what we have instead of reinventing ourselves. But change doesn't wait for permission. The world rewards those who adapt, not those who cling to the past. The truth is, arrogance is often just fear in disguise. Fear of losing control, of being wrong, of starting over. But humility keeps you alive. Nokia taught the world a painful lesson. Success is never owned. It's only rented, and the rent is due every day. In the end, the fall of Nokia wasn't a technological failure. It was a psychological one. And that is the paradox of money, power, and pride. I'm your host, and this is Money Paradox. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the hidden psychology behind success and failure.